This episode has some of my personal political views in it, and I've typically shied away from sharing my views because ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community, and as a community, I want to bring people together so we can all learn from each other. But politics affects those of us with disabilities, and while these conversations may be difficult, it is my hope that today's conversation can help all of us be better listeners, communicators, and citizens, no matter who you voted for. I hope that you find my approach to this conversation respectful, and if you choose to share your thoughts with me or in the community, I ask that you do so in a respectful way. And if you're feeling fired up about a particular issue or comment, which even happened to me during this conversation, which I was totally called out on, do what I was told to do. And that's it. Take a breath. Communicate from a place of love and a desire to understand. Because if there is one thing that all of us desire, it is to be understood. Enjoy the episode. ADHD reWired, episode 158. This is the show designed for those of us with really good intentions, but a slightly wandering attention. My name is Eric Tivers. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, coach, and speaker. The website is ADHDrewired.com. We know that starting is the hardest part, so let's get started. Welcome back to another episode of ADHD reWired. Today, we have returning to the podcast best-selling author of 5 books on ADHD, blogger, speaker, counselor, and friend, Dr. Stephanie Sarkis. Dr. Sarkis is a licensed mental health counselor, a national certified counselor, and a Florida Supreme Court certified mediator. She maintains a private practice in Tampa, Florida, where she specializes in ADHD, autism, and anxiety. Dr. Sarkis is a blogger for Psychology Today and the Huffington Post. And recently, one of her blogs went viral, and she was interviewed, I think it was on CNN. Is that right?
Yeah, and German news.
And
too.
that. So between CNN, German news, and now ADHD reWired. I'm not sure where I fall between.
I just keep going higher and higher. What can I say?
Well, Stephanie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, today's episode, what we're going to do is we're going to be juggling a little bit of hot cold today, but I think for a very important reason. Your blog post that you wrote that went viral was on gaslighting.
Right.
Okay. So before we sort of explain gaslighting, which we will in just a moment, we're going to be talking a little bit about some politics on the show, but not taking views and sides per se. What we want to really talk about on today's episode is, I'll start with the story. So I'll share my personal political persuasion. I'm a social worker, so things about social justice, human rights, advocating for people with disabilities, these tend to be democratic issues. Okay. So for me, that's where I stand. Right. So not saying that other people are wrong, right? We have different points of view. So as someone who...
We meaning you and other people in the world.
Right.
Not like personally.
Right.
Right. So we can talk about that too. But anyways,
okay. So
just to clarify.
Yeah. So
we're not doing political debate today.
So when that might be fun though, but so Stephanie and I were talking on Facebook. I think we were either you were responding to one of my posts or I was responding to one of your posts. Mm-hmm. And then I messaged you and I shared with you that I was, since the inauguration, I've been struggling personally because I'm a concerned citizen, and the things that I see on the news are deeply concerning to me. Okay. And I was noticing that it was having an impact on my own mental health. I was not sleeping well. Like for a good 2 weeks, my sleep was just really, really awful. And then I sort of took a step back and I recognized that if I'm going to be an engaged citizen right now, I need to prioritize sort of self care. Um, so I want to sort of put that sort of piece of the story in there because I'm not trying to remain neutral in this. I think that there are certain issues and things that we all need to be aware of and have a conversation about as citizens of whether it's this country in the U.S. or if you're listening elsewhere. So part of this is how to have hard conversations and also how to recognize sort of some of the thinking traps and also the what would you call them, bait traps that sort of get us sucked into some of these um, arguments, whether it's online or in face-to-face interactions.
So more like the gaslighting stuff I was writing about. So how to know when there's manipulation stuff going on.
So what is gaslighting?
Okay. Gaslighting is a series of behaviors that's used to manipulate. You see it in narcissistic personality disorder, sociopathy, also known as antisocial personality disorder. You see it in um, uh, people that are trying to gain control over people. So, like dictators and cult leaders, and again, people that are like narcissists are trying to get the upper hand, and also just plain old, emotionally abusive people.
Hmm.
The ways that people gaslight people is first denying their reality. They'll blatantly lie and say that I never said that, even though you're pretty sure they said it. But the more that they tell you they never said something, then you start questioning whether you've made it up.
Hmm.
They also tend to throw in positive praise every once in a while just to kind of keep you off kilter so you don't think that they're bad all the time. They also tend to pit people against you. So they'll tell somebody else that you're crazy. So that let's say like you're in a relationship and that person's told someone you're crazy and you go to them and you go, hey, this person's kind of crazy. I need to get out. They're like, oh, no, 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 you're the one that's crazy.
Hmm.
Because when you call somebody crazy, it's a way of dismissing them. And so that person becomes more isolated when they realize that they've been talked about to the mutual friends. It's also isolating you from your family members. So it could be that you have a family member that the person you're in a relationship with says, I don't like them. And it's a really vague reason why. But they want you to cut off contacts because you get isolated and more dependent on them. And that's the name of the game, is to become more dependent on them. And so they can gain more and more control over you. So those are some of the facets of gaslighting. And you see that across different personality types and also in abusive relationships.
Now I know that your article didn't mention any candidate or political figure by name. It's people are interested in this topic because we do see right now that this is a tactic that describes a lot of what Donald Trump is doing right now.
And I actually wrote the article with not political stuff in mind, but that's been a large response from the comments on Psychology Today has been from political point of view, and actually from both sides of the aisle. I don't know if manipulation is uh, any one party has the corner on manipulation. I
Right.
think that happens with both. So I'll just say that I think that people are becoming more aware of manipulative behavior, no matter what side it's on.
Hmm.
Which I think it's good that we're becoming more and more aware of who we've elected, regardless of the party, if we're kind of being told something that's not true.
Hmm.
So I think it's made people more politically active and also more aware of their own relationships too, and when they're being gaslighted. So
Hmm.
pretty interesting. And I'll just add the reason why it's called gaslighting is there's a movie called Gaslight from 1944, and there's a man that tries to drive his wife kind of insane, basically by one of the things he does is he changes the um, dimming of the gas lights in their home, and then he denies he did it. So that's where the term comes from, if people are
Oh,
wondering, because it is
interesting.
kind of an odd
I
kind of
was wondering that
point.
actually.
So yeah, that's why gaslighting is called that. So but again, that happens, and again, both parties can be, can have manipulation tactics, and especially in campaigning. So and so again, I didn't write particularly for that, but it's interesting how it got picked up as a kind of a political piece.
And one of the things that I'm seeing too in my coaching groups and in my ADHD rewired community is that people are being really sort of impacted by this. We know because I do want to make this conversation relevant for the listeners of the show, right? So some of the things that I see happening is that because this is, for better or worse, a very stimulating thing that's going on. We know that those of us with ADHD are attracted to things that are stimulating. It sort of locks our brain into it. And so one of the things that I see is that people are having a hard time sort of disengaging from it. And it as I sort of shared at the very top of the interview, that it's having a negative impact on them. So, what are some of the things that you would suggest to people who are really sort of getting completely enthralled? And I talk to people where they are talking about how they haven't been able to really function since the inauguration.
Right. And I think that there's a hyper focusing piece of ADHD where you can ruminate on something almost to the point of obsessing with it, especially if it has to do with change. Because with ADHD, we tend not to do well with change. And then if it's change that someone doesn't agree with, I think then it's even more pronounced.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that the first step is, like you mentioned, practicing good self care.
Hmm.
I've had quite a few people come into my office noticing that they're having increased issues with insomnia. Uh, Not eating as well or eating too much, sometimes sleeping too much instead of insomnia, just difficulty keeping track of their daily activities. I'm not connecting with their family as much, even. So I think it's really important to practice good self care, and that means stepping away from the electronics. I think that when you go on Facebook and on Twitter, and that's healthy for communication in ways, but also to turn it off. And I'm starting to run into people that are having issues with their family members because they're at the dining room table, texting and tweeting and Facebooking, and that's causing a lot of issues. So I think it's really important first to have set limits on when you're going to shut off electronics.
Hmm.
Not only that, but when you use electronics, whether it's a phone, laptop, tablet, 2 hours before bed, you're inhibiting the release of melatonin in your brain.
Hmm.
And melatonin is a hormone that gets you ready to go to sleep. And people with ADHD already have inhibited melatonin release. So you're basically inhibiting the ability to sleep even more. So I recommend that people shut off electronics at least an hour before bed. Books, instead of reading your phone or your iPad. Also, non-backlit devices like the Kindle, was it Kindle Paperwhite?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are found to not inhibit melatonin release. So there are ways you can still kind of read without getting your brain chemicals going, because the wavelength of light in backlit devices is the same wavelength you see in seasonal affective disorder light boxes.
Hmm.
So it's basically the wavelength of sunlight. So your brain thinks it's time to party. So really important that you shut those off, especially before bed. Have the same sleep and wake time. That's important too. Instead of staying up, 2, 3 in the morning, going surfing on your phone. Also, if it's a real problem, you can get your phone carrier to shut off your data service between certain hours. I think there's a monthly fee for that, a small fee.
Do you know what carriers do that?
I know that T-Mobile does it. I'm pretty sure the other ones do it too.
Oh.
I think T-Mobile, it was $5. That price may have changed. I'll add that caveat. And you can. This also works for shutting off your kids' phones too. So
$5 or even $10 to outsource willpower? Sign me up.
right, and there are also apps like there's Leech Block that you can add onto your browser. And leech like a blood sucking leech. And the idea behind is the internet sucks time like a leech sucks blood. So you can add that on your browser and tell it, I don't want to go to, I don't know, lolcats.com Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, if you're getting in trouble at work for
Is that a
surfing the
real
internet.
website?
That LOL Cats actually is, yeah.
Is it bookmarked
Yeah.
on your
I
browser?
thought it was a made up site. I was using it as an example, but then I found out LOL Cats is very real. So, uh, So if you use a blocker like that, what happens is when you go to LOL Cats, you'll see a big circle with a slash through with a leech saying this site's been blocked by Leech Block. And it's interesting how many people have told me that they don't recollect clicking on a link. They don't recollect typing something in your address bar, going to their favorites. That's how far your brain checks out when you're online. You have ADHD. As
Yeah.
Barkley said, electronics are cocaine for the ADHD brain.
It's amazing how many times I'll be in my office with a client and I'm going to check something on my calendar on my phone, right? And I open up Facebook. I'm like, I did not just mean to do that. And then I'll close it, and then I'll do it again. It's like,
Well,
oh my,
it's addictive, and
yes,
also shutting off notifications helps. So not have your phone buzz you every time you get an email. The phone's there for your convenience, not
yes,
you there for it. So
yes,
shut off
yes.
your Facebook notifications, shut off your Twitter notifications, so that stuff will be waiting for you when you need to access it. So, and also just block off in your calendar even times to check your email. Otherwise, you could be checking it all the time, and you're not taking in the environment around you.
When we think about some of the sort of the fundamentals of ADHD management, it's writing things down. Like just
Hmm.
assume you're going to forget it, so you have to write it down.
Right.
Having clocks and timers, in your environment. I think that in that list should be turn your notifications off. Like, I think that
Yes.
is such like, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about that one as much. And it's like we I mean, I can literally get distracted by like a speck of dust that catches a light in a certain way. Now,
Hmm.
I mean,
Right.
it's almost comical when it happens during like a coaching or therapy session, where like I'll either be in mid sentence or my client, and I'll just like my attention will just be turned to literally a speck of dust. Not even an analogy, like an actual speck of dust, which I guess means I probably needed dust more in my office. Anyways, so
I'll make you feel better by saying that dust is just present in the environment. So I'm asthmatic, so I'm hip to the dust issue.
oh,
So it
okay.
doesn't mean that you're not clean. I just want to make you feel better, Eric, so
Thank
your self
you.
esteem isn't affected.
Thank you. I do
You're
need to
welcome.
dust though.
Now, as far as watching dust while your clients are talking, that's another issue that we can talk about separately from this podcast.
It's
So,
it's a nice thing to be able to be fully open and out as having ADHD with all the clients that I work
isn't
with.
it? It's
It's
great.
so
Yeah,
I
and
don't have
I
to.
think it helps too because people realize that you've walked a walk. So I think that really helps.
So what are the so so far we're talking about sort of the self-care piece, right? So the
Hmm.
making sure we're sleeping. And I don't think we mentioned exercise, but like definitely exercise. If you want to get some good cardio exercise, read something related to some of these issues or listen to something related to some of these issues while you're exercising.
Right. Listening to podcasts while you're exercising is great.
Hmm.
Or I tell people too, if you're walking around the block with your kids, that counts as exercise. Leave your iPad, iPhone at home and just walk around the block and communicate with your kids. So important to have that face to face contact with your spouse or partner too, because we're missing a lot of that when we're on our phones.
Yeah.
If you're walking on your own, I've seen a lot of people do Pokemon Go where they get points and earn little coins for or little eggs and stuff for catching Pokemon for how far they walked.
Are you
So
are you
then
playing Pokemon Go?
I have dabbled in it. Yes, I can identify the first generation of Pokemon, which scares me, and also um, also helps a lot by working with clients with little ones.
Because
So
of my history with when I first um, downloaded Minecraft, and it was this is for research purposes, right? Because all my clients were playing it, and I was like, okay, I got to see what this game is all about, so I can relate to them. That was one of the deepest, darkest holes of hyperfocus I think I went into since like college.
yeah,
Oh my
I
gosh.
haven't done Minecraft yet. I'm probably not touching
I,
that
I, I
one.
really wouldn't. It's so I'm glad to say right now because listeners know that I've struggled with some of the video game sort of addiction stuff where it really is an
Mhm.
addiction where it's like I don't want to be doing this, and I'm not only do I do it then for what I want it to be 15 minutes, it turns into 2 hours, and I'm just like
Right.
ugh, like it's so frustrating. Um,
Right.
but so right now I am not playing any games, and it feels great. I feel
And
happier not playing games.
well, what does help with exercise too is getting an app where it gives you points for doing exercise. Tap into that positive reinforcement thing that works so well for ADHD. Fitocracy, it's spelled like democracy, except with FIT in the front.
Yeah,
Free app that gives you points, even gives you points for taking the stairs into the elevator, and you rise
nice.
up through levels based on how many points you're earning.
Oh, cool.
And they also have they have challenges like bike for 2 miles and then walk for half a mile, and they'll give you extra points. And we really like that stuff. Where ADHD, again, a little badge on the screen, rising up through levels, and again, that's helped a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I use an app called Insight Timer for meditation, and I
Hmm.
love I love
That's a
when
good one
when I
too.
get a thing that says after I've meditated, you've just meditated for this many days. Like I'm like,
Yay!
yeah.
It gives you a little dopamine boost.
it,
Dopamine's low in ADHD, so when you get the little boost, and you also get that from when your phone dings and rings too.
mhm.
So that's kind of you have to cut off your source of dopamine boost sometimes.
Yes.
So
Okay. So obviously the issues of self care are super important, but how do we address some of these issues sort of head on when we want to be engaged in it? Because what we're not saying is just don't engage in it and sort of bury your head in the sand. Like that's not helpful either.
You can engage in a healthy way. I think
Right.
when you look at people that have made great social change, I think it's important for people with ADHD to read about people who made great social change because they did still take time to take care of themselves.
Hmm.
I think that's a myth that in order to be effective, that you have to go 24 hours a day. But again, take a look at people that there's people rested still when they were doing social change. So yeah, the point is that you can still be active, but you have to take care of yourself in order to be the most beneficial person you can be. And if you're a parent, it's like on the airplane, they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before your kids,
Right.
right? You got to take care of yourself to be the best parent you can be. And if you have kids with special needs, that takes even more level of energy. So it's really important to again, really take a hard look at, are you taking care of yourself? Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Are you being around positive people? The people that you're around, it turns out their attitude is contagious. There have been several studies about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So make sure that you surround yourself with people that lift you up rather than bring you down. So I think that's really important. I'm not talking about like if somebody's depressed that you don't communicate with them. It's more like if somebody says to you, "Oh, well, you're ridiculous for thinking that," or da, da, da. I mean, it's just step away from that
Hmm.
and be around people that, again, like they may disagree with you, but they're also encouraging of you exploring your own ideas. I
Hmm.
think those are the people that you really need to focus on. So
So,
take a look around people around you that when you're around them, you feel good, and take
mhm.
a look at the people that emotionally drain you.
So for I'm going to use myself again.
Mhm.
So I am someone who, while has strong sort of opinions and ideas about things, I am also someone who is willing to say when I'm wrong, right? And I want to hear other perspectives. And that's one of the things I'm really deeply interested in right now is so there's many people that I know and have relationships with who politically we really disagree, right? And so I look at some of these people and they're good people, right? It's like what is the backstory behind like my sort of upbringing and how my values sort of are what they are versus their values and how they are what they are, because I don't like I think it's easy to paint this broad stroke of anyone who supports Trump must be a racist, and it's not true. Like it's not, right?
No, no.
Then so and as I say that, I'm like, well, but if you don't speak against some of the things that he's saying, doesn't that mean you are
Well, keep in mind that not everyone knows how to do that. Now, you have an advanced degree in social work, right?
yes.
But keep in mind that not everybody knows which route to take with that
Hmm.
if they do want to protest something or do want to speak out. And for a lot of people, this is the first time that they become politically active. So keep that in mind that you're kind of a different level of, you've been taught in classes how to advocate, right? So it's really important to, at some point, let people know how to advocate
Hmm.
for others because it's not an innate skill. It's
Right.
something that we learn.
I mean,
So
is there does it need to be taught, Stephanie, that calling someone an idiot or a snowflake or
now I'm not talking about ad hominem attacks. That's where you
but as I see
what
this
I'm what
so
I'm
often
talking
though.
about. Oh, you gotta talk yourself down. Take a deep breath, Eric. Take a deep breath. Okay. So what I'm talking about is that when, let's say, whoever you voted for, whether Republican, Democrat, whatever, uh, sometimes people are kind of concerned of how do you go about expressing your ideas about it. And I'm not, again, ad hominem attacks, that's a whole other story that we can talk about. But keep in mind that not everybody knows how to advocate or how to speak out, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes people feel like they're not going to be heard if they speak out. So keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, too, to be understood, you have to understand.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
figure
Yeah.
out where
Yeah.
the person's coming from. Rarely is anything personal. Whoever somebody voted for, whether it's Clinton or if it was for Trump, that had no personal reflection on you
Hmm.
and maybe against what you thought of or what your beliefs are. But again, the great thing about the US is that we're allowed to vote for whoever we want to.
Hmm.
So take this as an opportunity to get an idea of what's going on. There are a lot of disenfranchised people in the US.
Yeah.
And And we really need to look at why that happens and how we can remedy that. And part of that, again, is seeing where other people are coming from. Now, again, ad hominem attacks where you're calling names, that's a whole nother level where you disengage, because that's not productive. But I'm just talking about general, trying to get opinions and ideas across can be really difficult for some people.
Well, and it's even, I think sometimes difficult for myself. I posted on my Facebook page, my personal page the other day. There was a House Bill 899, which was just a very simple 1 or 2 sentence bill that just called for the abolishment of the Department of Education.
Right.
Right. So I look at that.
And Environmental Protection Agency too, I believe. It's both. So that's where, there's an app called Countable, and that you can get for free, and you put in your zip code and it tells you who your representatives are. So I think this is interesting. A lot of people are finding out now who the representatives are, because those are the people that they work for us. So that app will tell you, what areas you're most interested in, whether it's education, whether it's labor, and they'll give you an update on what bills are being proposed, what's passed, how your representatives voted. And I think it's really important to see stuff like that, because I think earlier people weren't really kind of noticing that stuff. So again, there are apps that will tell you how they voted, and then get in touch with your representatives. Contact them if you have a particular feeling about a bill.
So I want to dive into that about contacting them. I'm going to make a note here so we come back to that. I just wrote counting. That's not. What was I trying to write?
The app is Countable.
No, okay, so Countable was the app, but I wanted to write the
and
contacting
your congressman.
I combined 3 words when I was trying to make a mental note while talking. Okay.
You're just amazing like that, Eric.
Yeah, I look down at my note. I'm like, what in the world does that mean? But what I wanted to say, so I find out what I was actually trying to say after this.
My name is Stephen Tonti. I have ADHD. I am a writer, director, and public speaker, and I was a part of Eric Tivers' ADHD reWired coaching and accountability group. And a message for those considering joining: I have not been a part of a support group or support network, anything like Eric's ADHD coaching group, in my 25 years on the planet. And after being a part of that coaching group, it is a mission of mine to not only facilitate groups like it, but also be a part of a group whenever I can, for as long as I can. One of the strongest impressions that I got from the group was my first impression. I'd say top 5er. I, again, was sort of reluctant in the beginning to join the group at all, because of this preconceived notion that I was working it out and had done a pretty good job of figuring it out myself. So when the first session rolled around, I think it was a Monday, I did this kind of arguably arrogant thing where I was gonna take the session on the road. Like, I had taken a train to Brooklyn and had scheduled a meeting right at the end of the session. So I was like, I've got an hour for the session. I'm going to be at this dude's house in Brooklyn when the session ends. And I'm on my phone walking through Brooklyn on Zoom. And within the first 15 minutes of the first session, just the introductions, we spent the first 30 minutes introducing the 11 or 12 of us. And by the 4th person, I was pretty damn near tears, which I did not expect at all. You can't really plan for that sort of thing. And the reason was, it was extremely clear. There's no confusion as to why I was feeling that way. It dawned on me like a tidal wave. It crashed like a tidal wave that I was in this very special group of people from all walks of life, varying ages, all sharing one very key specific quality, right? Which is ADHD. And we all come at it from different angles and different places, but sharing that with 12 people is it's very intangible, right? And hard to quantify, but extremely important. And it crashed on me. Like, it just hit me like a freight train all of a sudden. And I was like, I think the thought was, oh my God, I get this, I get it. This is gonna be really important. I didn't realize it's gonna be important, but I can tell now this is gonna be important. And in closing, get ready for the first session, because 4 to 5 introductions in, you'll get it. It'll wash over you like a tidal wave.
I want to thank Stephen Tonti for sitting down with me at the CHAD conference to share his experience of joining this group. So you've watched this entire video. You possibly have heard people from past coaching groups on my podcast talk about the experience that they've had in the coaching group. Go to coachingrewired.com and schedule that call today. Give yourself the gift of coaching, of community, of connection. Click that link and schedule the call with me. It's no obligation. This is more than just a coaching group. This is ADHD rewired. Hey, thanks for not fast forwarding through the ad. Go to coachingrewired.com to schedule your registration call with me. Group starts April 24th. Our group is filling up. 2 of our 3 groups are already halfway full, and the other one also has a couple spots in it so far. These groups will fill up. We have 3 sections. Our spring session starts April 24th, but you can register now. I have limited availability on Tuesdays and Thursdays, but if you schedule it before March 24th, you can also save $100. All right, let's get back to the interview, and I hope to talk with you soon. I saw this bill, and my sort of how I added it to my personal page was I said this is just insane and immoral, right? And so that was sort of my think about abolishing the Department of Education. That just seems like crazy to me. Then I was taken to task a little bit on my comments there, and I got a little defensive there. But then I was reflecting. It's like, well, one of the people that was taking me to task had said something about this $70 billion Department of Education, what are they actually doing? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, maybe I need to know what the issues are a little bit even deeper. But so part of me thinks that as when we think about the history of education, right? It wasn't that long ago that if a student had disabilities that the school didn't know how to respond to, they didn't have to educate that student. Without the Department of Education, that wouldn't schools would not be required to do that if it was
okay. So let's back up, because there are federal laws about exceptional ed that are that still stay on the books.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's maybe people say comments about that. I didn't see where you wrote that, because we're personal Facebook friends, but the exceptional ed laws still stand for now, and that's my understanding is that's a separate thing from the Department of Education. I'm not saying I when I'm doing something professionally like this, I don't get into my political views. I do that personal level. So keep in mind that the exceptional ed laws still stand.
Okay. And I think these sort of specific issues, because we know that as if you're an adult with ADHD and you have a child, that there's a good chance that the tree that you have grown has bared the fruits of ADHD as well. If you follow that analogy, your child's the fruit, just make sure we follow that. So this impacts our kids. Right? That's where my fear is. So one of the people's response to my thread was, well, what's your fear? And then my response, and in hindsight, that was a little sort of passive aggressive. My response to this person was, well, do you have kids?
Well, I think that it's great that you're identifying that you're being passive aggressive, because I think that's something that we need to look at too, is when we're responding to people, that being passive aggressive kind of shuts down the other person's response. And we may think the other person just was way off the mark with their their view. But when you're passive aggressive, it kind of shuts down the avenue of communication, and that's an opportunity for education.
Right. And when I was reflecting on it, I was like, okay, so if I'm going to put myself out there and make statements of personal political views, I have to be, on my page. My first thought was like, how dare he come on my personal page and state his opinion, which is different than mine. I was like, wait, hold on a second. So I was recognizing that I was more in a defensive, emotional spot there. And so and so I haven't responded to, I've been sort of giving it sort of time, which I think is so important, whether it's online or offline. If you're feeling emotional, just hit the pause button, just don't respond.
Right. There's nothing that says you have to respond.
Right.
And if you have control of your Facebook page. So, I mean, anything that goes online stays there forever, even if it's deleted, but you can always delete your post. You can delete comments. I mean, it's,
But
so
and I was going to, but then I'm like, you know what? No, like I want the part of what I want to be able to do and to be able to model is how to engage with people who you disagree with to, as you said,
right.
to get a better understanding, so we can all get a better understanding of each other.
Mhm.
And it's I mean, as you said, I'm trained as a social worker, so I do have some training in this, but it's hard. It's really hard. So if it's hard for me, so what do you think as a community, or people who want to get more engaged and can also identify their sort of, that they're getting emotionally involved in this? What do you think what do you think we can do?
Well, on activity level, I think it's important to get involved with professional organizations and also advocacy organizations like CHADD. So that's CHADD.org. That's a big national ADHD group. And they have a professional advisory board. They have a policy committee. So that's where a lot of change happens. Again, that Accountable app that tells you who's voting for what, so you can contact your legislators. I think those are two of the main pieces: is get involved with people that have the same feelings as you and are using appropriate means to discuss or protest. And then also, again, take a look at what your body's reaction is. How do you know when you're getting too keyed up about something? Is it you can feel your heart beating in your ears because your heart's beating so hard, or is it that your blood pressure is going up, or is it you start sweating, or you just feel this overall feeling of yuck, or you feel nauseous? Really be aware of how you're feeling. Because you have ADHD, it's easy to let that ball get rolling and not catch it. So, and again, yeah, like you said, it's you can take time out. You don't have to answer something right now. It'll still be there if it's on the internet. So, and again, yeah, if you're going to ask questions to people and you're going to post political stuff, you're going to get opinions back. So, and that's one of the things too. I think it's difficult for a lot of people, is that people that they thought had certain political persuasions are actually feeling the other way. And I think, part of it is that that's the beauty of friendships, is that we have, if everybody was the same, that'd be kind of boring. But I'm not talking about like ad hominem attacks where you're attacking someone or attacking a particular race or culture. I mean, that's something where you have to take a look at, maybe you need to parse down your friend list a little bit. So, but yeah, I mean, there are limits. If somebody's just expressing their opinion that they don't agree with you, then that's great. So let's talk about it. Maybe your opinion is going to be changed. Maybe their opinion is going to be changed. But again, set a limit to what you won't tolerate. And that would be any name calling, any, again, discrimination of any kind of group. I think that's where I think a lot of people with ADHD have a strong sense of justice. And that really gets our feathers kind of ruffled up. And so that's where, again, that we need to really take a look at, who we're associating with. And again, get active in, if you feel that there's a group that's been disenfranchised, I remember we were talking about that there have been quite a few bomb threats of Jewish community centers. And one was, I guess, near you. So, yes. That's something where
the one that my son
that
goes
your son
to
goes
yes.
to. And so that's completely understandable why that would be a personal thing.
So talking about being aware of the physical feelings, goosebumps from my head to my toe right now. Just so you know, right. when you bring that up.
Well, I got goosebumps too. You can't see them on the thing, but yeah. So that's something where that's where we know and we acknowledge that as a parent, That stuff's going to get you to your core.
Right, because
So,
it gets so primal there. It's
mhm.
like,
And you're wired for that. And the good thing is
yeah,
you know that you have that primal wiring, which is the way you should be as a parent. That should really terrify you, right?
right.
So acknowledge what stuff you're willing to get into discussing and which stuff you don't want to touch. Do you know what I
And,
mean? Like,
and you mentioned too about getting involved in organizations, and you mentioned Chad.
mhm,
Um, uh, about 2 weeks ago, and I know in the Georgia legislation, there was a bill on that was
mhm,
proposed to make
right.
to require people with a prescription for a stimulant medication to need
Every week.
every 5 days
Yeah.
because they were
Yep. To get a new prescription. Yeah.
and
Sorry.
and
I'm
Chad
sorry. I interrupted you, and this is on meds. So hey. So
and,
yeah.
and and Chad
And
was
keep in
on it,
mind, bills are not law.
right.
Now let's also keep that in mind too. That sometimes people throw bills out there to see if they'll stick and to
Right.
get their name out in the press. So keep that in mind.
But what I
So.
wanted to mention though is that
Mhm,
Chad, from what I understand,
mhm,
went to the Georgia
mhm.
legislation and advocated to make sure that bill was amended to remove that part of the legislation. So
Right, because it
it's
also
like,
covered opioids. Yeah, yeah. So that's something where Chad did advocacy work, and that's where you can get involved too. Even if you're not in Georgia, and you can still do an email campaign or talk to people, and again, the professional organizations and other advocacy organizations. There's National Alliance for Mental Illness. They're a big advocacy group. They do stigma busters, which is pointing out inappropriate references to mental health in different areas, whether it's online or on TV or something. So there are other ways to get involved too, where you advocate. And again, contact your legislators. Again, they're employees of us.
so I'm looking at my chicken scratch notes and I found contacting. So I love when it actually works. When I write something down and we go back to it, it feels just like a big win.
Yay!
So contacting your legislators. So I want to share sort of what I did to sort of, because we know that starting can be the hardest part. So how do we sort of
Mhm.
break down the walls of, well, how do I actually do that? So what
Right.
I did is I went to us.gov, and then you can search for the House of Representatives and the
Mhm.
senators. You can do it by zip code. Then what I did is I put in my phone. I saved it to my phone. Each person's name, sort of their title, and then I think I titled them all as just elected officials or Congress. So when I want to contact them, I have that information there. So it decreased the number of steps from, oh,
Mhm.
I want to contact my legislature. So, because otherwise it's like the first step is look up how to do that or find out who
Right.
they actually are.
And
Um,
block in your schedule too when you're going to do that instead of doing it all day too.
Yes, that's a really good point too, because it's because it's good for two reasons. One is telling you when to do it, but it's also telling you when not to do it, which I think is
Mhm.
probably just as important with this. If you're
Right.
finding yourself getting very like sort of all consumed in this.
Right. And I think it's also important too to take a break and see what's going well.
Hmm.
That people are becoming more politically active. People are talking about their political points of view than when before they didn't.
Hmm.
I think there's a segment of the population that's being heard now that wasn't heard before. I think that it's really gotten people to take a step back and to see what their values are. I think, which is important. I think it's made people more aware of, again, that some of those gaslighting techniques. And again, I'll just say that that's not isolated to any political party. That's used
Right.
amongst both. So I think also it's really made us look at the Constitution. What does it mean? What are the different parts of it? Because sometimes in school people didn't learn about the Constitution or didn't read it. And I've noticed people are actually reading it now, which is important. It's important for all citizens because that covers everybody, regardless of your political persuasion or not. So again, that stuff like that, I think is really that's really improving.
Hmm.
A lot of people are becoming civically active, active in their community. So I think we need to take a step back too and look at what's going well because it's really easy to get wrapped up in um, getting. We can get, especially with ADHD, too much again. That snowball starts rolling, and then we forget to sleep or we forget to eat or forget. Again.
Or just like not able to because our minds are
Mhm.
spinning around the stuff,
Right, and
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 that's what
also keep in mind what you have control over and what you don't.
talk about that.
Right. So when you have ADHD, sometimes you want to be able to control stuff because things feel really chaotic. But we have to keep in mind there's things we control and things we can't. Things we can control are contacting legislators, being involved in policy committees, policy groups, being involved in professional organizations, things like having positive discourse communication with friends about their political views. And the things we don't have control over is once someone's elected, what can we do about that, right? So, but what we can do is make sure that we go out and vote. And we usually in the U.S. have a generally low voter turnout, which needs to change, because in a lot of countries you're not even allowed to vote, or your vote is not. I'm trying to think of the right word for this. The elections aren't legitimate. And so I think it's important to remember that, it's within our kind of citizen obligation, all of us, again, regardless of political affiliation, to vote, because that's one of the biggest ways that we can influence or make change. So, and there are elections coming up in 2017, 18?
Yeah, not that long from now.
Not that long from now.
Right.
So again, really keep in mind, again, with apps and also reading up on how people voted for something, and see how your House of Representatives person and your senators voted. Every state has 2 senators, and you have a specific representative for your area. So keep in mind to look and see what who they are, what they stand for, and again, you have the right to voice your say about that.
And so I know that a lot of people with ADHD also struggle with anxiety. And I think there's a specific type of anxiety that a lot of us have. And that's, I don't know if it's an official term, but I'll just call it phone anxiety. I'm totally guilty of it too. Like picking up the phone when it's like, when you're not really sure what's going to happen. So any tips on that? So if someone wants to contact their legislators.
You can write to them as well. You can email. There's all sorts of different ways to contact people. I think you posted a script, I don't know if it was on your business page, but it was a really nice script as to how to talk to someone. And you have that printed out or on your screen, and you just read, and the people answering the phone, keep in mind that they're just as overwhelmed as you are. So, and when you follow that script exactly what you want to say, it really decreases the anxiety. So, and also you can do role play too. Have a friend or family member, do a role play of when you call and what you're going to say. And again, they count, the aides will count, and the legislative aides will count emails. They'll count phone calls. They'll count postcards. They'll count letters.
And faxes. Apparently faxes are, from what I've heard recently, have become very effective as means, because it puts something tangible in that person's hands.
Right. And there are services that you can do online faxes, like S-Fax. So S as in Sam, fax is one of them. And I don't get paid or endorsed by any of the things I've been mentioning today. I just want to throw that out there. So you can fax right from your computer. So you don't have to have, quote unquote fax machine. So,
and also check to see if your elected officials are on Facebook. I know that some of mine are, and and they'll post stuff on their Facebook page, and that gives me an opportunity to respond to what they're saying.
And it's a great way to meet people too. So we had an issue with my city that I got involved with the action group there, and I met some really great people that otherwise I don't know I would have met in my city. So really important again that we look at how can we go out there and make a difference, and sometimes that's just by sheer numbers of people too. And it's a great way, especially if you have ADHD. You may have comorbid social anxiety, and going out and doing something feels kind of funny and odd and scary. But if you have a common goal, it's much easier to go and meet people.
Yeah, it's I just hope that this the civic engagement continues, because I think of that as
I think it's actually getting stronger.
Yeah, it's that part feels good. It's because we do need to be an informed citizenry. I think that's just so important. You mentioned about that a lot of people are either going back to or looking at the Constitution for the first time. There's a podcast that I've listened to a few episodes of called Civics 101, and it's helping people sort of here's how government works. It's a real it's almost like Schoolhouse Rocks.
Right.
You should go back and watch Schoolhouse Rocks. That'd be good.
They've actually got Schoolhouse Rock has a whole thing on bills and how they make bills.
Yeah. How a bill becomes a law.
I forget what it's called. What is it called?
How a bill becomes a law.
Yeah, that's really it's accurate. So
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's and also do your fact checking too. If you see something that sounds like
One of
not
the
quite right,
one of the things that I started doing, because I got totally called out on this once, and I was like, oh man, I so any article that you see that like makes your blood boil, go to Google and look it up, right?
right,
Because I share something and then someone's like, no, that's actually not not accurate. I'm like, come on.
right.
So I'm like, oh man, that's embarrassing.
Right,
All
and one
right.
of the Facebook groups I'm in, the person, the admin, has made a list of legitimate news sources and ones
Mm-hmm.
that are not legitimate, kind of that have been basically busted for making up stories, and that's been really helpful. That you can look at this list. So if there's a list available online of legitimate news sources, I'm sure there is. Take a look at that.
I was listening to a podcast yesterday. It's that, what is it? Pod Save America. It's with this Obama speechwriters. It's great,
Hmm.
great podcast. And they're interviewing Ann Coulter in the latest episode, and she was making this suggestion, because this is on both sides, that
Hmm.
both sides are sharing stuff that's not legitimate. That the
Hmm.
meat that it would be good if we had sort of a cross, almost like if we look at our scholarly journals as peer reviewed, having a
Hmm.
process, and then similar to like Better Homes and Gardens, so they have that like seal of approval, right? Where you can sort of identify with a certain sort of seal or identification that this is a legitimate article.
Well, we actually do that in legitimate news organizations. So my undergrad degree is in telecom and TV
I
news.
always, every time you say that, I always forget that.
Yeah, so there is a vetting process you go through the news. You do have to run it past an editor
Hmm.
in legitimate news organizations. Now, that doesn't always mean it's the slant that you agree with, but overall, the press, that's our First Amendment right, and overall, the press is fair.
Hmm.
And again, for my telecom background, I have an inherent bias, I guess, but there is a vetting process that you undergo in legitimate news organizations before you can put something online
But
or
it's
in print.
but especially right now, as the current administration is trying to make you
Yeah,
question like what's legitimate and what's not, right? Like
right.
how does the typical consumer
I
read that
think
apart?
I think we really look at our hunch, and if it feels like it's a little too out there, then we need to check. When the headline says all or nothing, or it says yes or no in it, I think we need to look at it, because very rarely are there absolutes.
Right.
And just take a look at, were both sides of this issue interviewed. I think that's an important thing to look at too.
Hmm.
And yeah, I think that there is a vetting process in place, but yeah, we also have to be kind of savvy consumers. And oh, go ahead.
I was just thinking, do you think that we will be able to get back to a point where civic discourse in a civilized way like can happen again? Like I'm concerned about that.
I don't think it's gone away. I think it's there. I think that there's stuff being talked about that wasn't talked about before. And I think that's actually increased people's communication. Like I'm on a political board with political affiliations from all over the place, and I've noticed that people are engaging in really civil discourse, and I think that's really important. So I think we have to look at the fact we're actually moving forward in that
Mm,
direction. There are always going to be people that will again do ad hominem attacks where they're naming people, calling people names, and there's always going to be some level of bias, and racism and culturism. So but I think we really need to look at the fact that overall we're doing pretty good at banding together, and our common goal is protection of ourselves, protection of our kids,
right,
protection of
right.
our environment. I think
Hmm.
from whatever political side, I rarely run into somebody from either political side that is against the environment.
And, right,
So
and
so I think we have to look at again our common threads, and if your point is to educate people, then you need to again meet people where they're at. So
And I am sure if we were to just create a sort of a list, side by side stuff, I can almost guarantee that no matter what side of the ticket you vote, we have way more in common than we do different. Like I
Mhm.
we're not all that different from each other.
And keep in mind, everybody was raised differently. Everybody was raised
Yeah,
differently, and that's the beauty of the U.S. is that we have people from all different backgrounds.
yeah.
And And if you grew up like I did, an upper middle class background, you take a lot of, I try not to, but it's really easy to take some of the things for granted. So we need to take a look at, why people are disenfranchised.
Yeah.
What segment of the US was not being addressed? And I think that's an important thing. And a lot of people are mad. We have to look at, why are they mad?
For sure.
And I think that's something that we really need to take a deep look at. Right. So uh, I think overall, I think we're doing pretty good. I know it may not feel like it sometimes, but I feel like people on my Facebook page are talking about stuff, and on Twitter, that they never would have talked about with each other. I got into kind of a little debate with somebody on Twitter, and I said to him, well, thanks for addressing your points. That's something I really want to consider. And that sometimes people just want to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
They don't always do it in the most eloquent way. And again, I'm not talking about name calling and stuff. I'm talking about just sometimes people say stuff and it's not in a smooth way, but we need to hear what they're trying to say. And then if you don't know, ask. Say, I'm get a little confused. Tell me a little bit more about what you're trying to say to me.
It would be good if there was a Google Translator tool that can like decode like emotionally laden text and just like decode it so it's just like, what's the person actually trying to say?
And again, if you have someone that makes an ad hominem attack, and we've talked about the origin of snowflake, his anti-Semitic background to it.
Yes, and I don't think a lot of people realize
aren't aware
that.
of.
Right.
And I think that's something that we need to let people know about too. That has a lot of loaded meaning.
Well, explain what it means.
So that relates to Holocaust, and I'm not Jewish, but you are, so I'm going to let you take over. I'm like Jewish Presbyterian, which doesn't make sense, but we make beef brisket on Rosh Hashanah, so I don't know, but and we know Yiddish, which I don't know, but so I'm going to let you take over because it's a comment about this. Was it the cinder flakes that were coming from the
ashes
from the crematoriums,
right? And it looked like snow, right?
Yeah.
So that's. That the term snowflake was a derogatory term that was basically used like you're going to become a snowflake, like you're going to be burned in the crematorium, like
right. And I think the Gestapo would use that as to taunt prisoners, right? Is that?
I don't know that part.
I think that, but I think where the term snowflake came from now is individual snowflake, but we got to understand that has a historical meaning to it.
Right.
And I don't
think a lot of people recognize that.
Yeah, and I think that's important to let people know, and to not forget, and always remember those parts of history where we've aligned against a group. We just had the 75th anniversary of the Japanese internment in World War II. That's something else that's we need to look at. We as a history of as a people, we've had some pretty heavy discrimination going on.
Stephanie, when I first learned about that in high school, I think that was the first time that really sparked my sort of advocacy sort of part of myself. Because I, from as someone who was raised Jewish, like from a very young age, like learned about the Holocaust, right? And which is this horrific thing that wasn't that long ago, right?
Right.
And when I first learned about that the U.S. had that put Japanese Americans in internment camps during this, I'm like, why am I just learning about this? Like, I was outraged by it.
And here's something that blows people's minds too. That was done by a Democratic president. That was done by FDR. So keep in mind that if you're Democrat, things have not always been on the up and up. And also, if you're Republican, things have always been on the up and up.
But the old Democratic Party is more now what the Republican Party is.
True. But keep in mind, there's a fine line. There's a very fine line.
Yeah.
And when you get to be absolute about your views, you kind of meet around the corner. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think we in all of our discussions, I think it's healthy to take a position of, okay, there might be something that I don't understand here. And I think if we all come together with that mindset, I think we have a lot that we can learn from each other. But this is not going to be an easy thing for us to do as a community and as a nation. But I think this is one of our most important and I think probably defining struggles that we're going to have as a generation.
Yeah, and I think again we have the opportunity to make great change and to band together and again, yeah, talk about things that we really haven't talked about in a while, and give a voice to people that may not have felt like they were heard before.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a real opportunity for growth. So I think when we look at it that way, and it's an opportunity for us to go outside our comfort zone by being politically active, whatever side you're
Mm-hmm.
on.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of look from the point of what's going well with this, and what do we have control over, and that maybe even that you write it down. You may even need to write down, what do I have control over, what do I not have control over,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I change the things that I don't have control, that I do have control over. What's the AA thing? Is like discerning prayer.
Yeah,
Something, some,
accept what you cannot change. Something about what you can change, and the wisdom to
and the
know.
wisdom to know the difference,
Tho-
right?
Can we get
But,
partial credit for that answer?
and we had too, journaling helps too. If you're feeling really irate about something, you need to get on with your day. Just write it out,
You know,
record it,
I
dictate it.
and listeners and viewers know that I am not a writer. Like, writing is hard for me, and I did that a week or two ago, because I was just like, I knew I had work to do, and I just either watched or
Hmm.
heard something, and I could just feel the blood boiling, and I was
Right.
just like, I gotta get this out, and it felt so much better. Like, it
Yeah, you're
really
externalizing
does.
stuff. Your brain thanks you for doing that.
Yes.
And once you step back and look at something you've written, you can say, oh, this is how I can take action about that. Or is this something that I need to, accept? Accepting doesn't mean that you're happy about it,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
understanding there's some things you don't have control over. So, but
Mhm.
overall, I'm really proud of how we've done as a people, on both sides of the issues, with people talking to each other. And I think, social media has really helped with that. And again,
Mhm.
there's always going to be a small percentage of people that behave inappropriately, but let's focus on the people that have really tried to cross party lines and talk about stuff. And it's pretty miraculous actually how it's kind of come together in the last month or
Mhm.
so.
Mhm. Um, and I just want to put out there for viewers who might be watching on YouTube, or listeners on the podcast. If you're listening to this, and and your political views are different than mine, and you are still listening, first of all, thank you. That I think speaks to your open mindedness. I would love to hear your sort of feedback based on what the message that I'm trying to, in the conversation I'm trying to sort of initiate here, because I know that this is a little risky for me to do this, because I'm also I'm a business owner, but I'm also I believe in that we need to have this conversation. I think it's so important, and as a member of a community that has disabilities and who've been marginalized, I think this is an important conversation that we have. So whether you agree with me or you disagree, I just love to hear sort of your thoughts about this, because I really do want to lay a foundation to have a civilized conversation where we can be mindful and aware of sort of our own personal emotional positioning, but then trying to really hear and hear each other out. So if you think that Donald Trump is the greatest president ever, and you think that I'm just a fool for thinking what I do, like, okay, like, help me understand why, because I really, really do want to
But
understand
people
why.
think that that's okay.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the thing. That's okay. And it's okay if people feel like they align with you because of your political views. I think it's okay. And I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I just want to just reiterate that if people disagree with you, and I know with ADHD, sometimes we take things personally, but again, we don't know where people come from,
Mhm.
and we don't know what their background's been. We don't know how they've gotten to the point where they vote for whoever they vote for. So, and I think you brought up a good point where someone said about the Department of Education, well, exactly do they do? Well, here's our opportunity to find out,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And we probably could all use an education on what it does.
Right. Like, it's a valid question.
Right. I mean, now it's amazing to me the amount of people that can name who's the head of different divisions of the government, that before we're like, well, we know the president, the vice president, maybe our senators, but that, I mean, I have people that are able to name like every nominee for whatever, which pretty amazing stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So,
I mean,
but
and when I saw,
but you
go ahead, sorry.
well, I think also there's a fine line between when you do run your own business, how do you be true to your beliefs and also try to be as neutral as possible.
Right.
And I think that gets tricky too.
Because I don't think this is politics as usual anymore. Like, this is why I think that so many more people are now talking about politics, where in the past it would be considered like, you don't, it's like sex, politics, and religion. Don't talk about those things in polite company. But I think that we're recognizing that it's not even so much the person, but it's the policies that are having such a large impact, have the potential to have such a large impact on just so that where this country is going. I did have there's a Twitter feed that I follow called Shower Thoughts, which I just love. It's like just these random like thoughts. And so one of my recent shower thoughts was, well, what if all the stuff that Trump is doing actually ends up like helping a lot of stuff? Is that then gonna like what is that gonna do for sort of civil discourse? Like, is it gonna then say that that's okay? I don't know. It's a random shower thought. I don't know.
It's I think we're I think as in the U.S. as a whole, I think we're going through kind of like like when you're a teenager, you kind of do this like individuation, like growing to from your parents and stuff. I think there are people that are becoming more, they're stretching their political muscle more. And I think with that comes some growing pains. And I think that's just part of how things go. Because again, people are going outside their comfort zones.
So I think you're rubbing on your microphone.
Oh, I'm doing what?
Rubbing on your microphone.
I'm rubbing it?
You were
okay.
for a sec, yeah.
It's my luxurious hair getting wrapped up in the microphone. That's
Sorry, YouTubers. I'm probably not going to edit this part for YouTube, but podcasters won't hear it.
Now you can see I can tie my hair up without using a hair tie. There, that's my hidden skill. Is it better now?
So Stephanie, I don't know if you know this about me, but when I was in college, I used to have dreadlocks.
You can put your hair up without a hair tie?
Yes, I used to have dreadlocks, and I would take two of the dreads. Like, can you imagine this shiny head of mine used to be a full head of thick dreadlocks?
Actually, I can totally picture that.
There's a picture.
And I think you need to put a picture
somewhere.
You need to post a picture for everybody to see this.
It's somewhere floating around the internet. It was a picture of me. It's a black and white picture. I was playing keyboards at a gig. I was wearing a tie-dye shirt and overalls. I think I might be even smoking a cigarette, like in this picture. Like,
oh, you have to show that to me. This is part of being your authentic self. Is showing your picture, your dreadedness.
And so the story of that is that my mom hated. If you can imagine, my mom's kind of a stereotypical Jewish mother, and she hated my dreadlocks with a passion. It was like a personal affront to her, the fact that I had dreadlocks, right?
Now you don't have tattoos, do you?
I don't.
Okay, so you spared your mom
my sister does. And it's not that I wouldn't get a tattoo. It's a very permanent decision, and decisions aren't necessarily my strength.
I just have a feeling that wouldn't fly with your mom. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I don't really care, to be honest. Sorry, Mom.
Well, you did have dreads and that, so that.
But I brought. So what it was like 2 days before I was coming home because I was gonna have I was gonna have surgery, and I was kind of freaking out about it. So I cut my dreads off like the night before I was having surgery, and I came home, but I had a hood up, and I handed her this jar. I said, "Happy Hanukkah." She's like, "What is this?" And I took my hood off, and she was the best Hanukkah present she ever got.
Wait, a jar? You hand her a jar?
A big jar
of dreads?
It had my dread. I cut them off and put them in there.
You're kidding me. You need to write a blog. That's another thing people can do. Write a blog about your political views.
Yeah.
And you're bringing your dreads home in a jar to your mother. I think that's a good story.
Dreadlocks in a Jar. It's my new up and coming album that I'm gonna.
Oh, that's a good album name. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. You can have the jar. Did you get a picture of the jar? You can put that on the album cover.
I don't know what happened to them. I think when my parents moved, they refused to bring it with them. So
I'm assuming they threw it out at some point.
It was like in my childhood home, like room, like for a year. Like I opened that jar once. It was I can't ever take that moment back, and I wish I could.
Yeah, let's not go there. Let's not go there, Eric.
So Stephanie,
we've talked about a lot of disturbing things today, and a jar of dreads.
The line in the sand.
The line's been drawn.
Yeah.
Yep. And I actually have to go because I have a client coming in. So
How can people reach you?
People can reach me on my website. It's stephaniesarkis.com. That's my last name's S as in Sam, A-R-K-I, S as in Sam. And there's a newsletter on there where I talk about things like gaslighting. There's a Psychology Today blog, Huffington Post blog. So if you just Google me, they should pop up. So.
And are you speaking anywhere soon?
I am speaking in Indiana coming up. I'm speaking and doing a whole tour in New York. So if you go to the events page on my website, you can see all the places I'm going to be. I'm going to be at Manhattan. I'm going to be in Westchester County, upstate New York next month. So
awesome. We'll link to your website in the show notes. So you can just go to erictivers.com/whatever episode number this is. Just put that number after the slash. Stephanie, thank you so much. This is a really this is a great conversation. I think that we managed to do it with hopefully not offending too many people.
I think we did in a pretty even way.
We did. And we were both a little like we're approaching cautiously, but I think
and you're pretty chilled out. That's good. I later remind you to breathe once, so that's good.
Meditation helps.
Yeah, it does. Maybe next time we should talk about compensation stuff.
Let's do it.
Right?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day. We'll talk again soon.
Thank you. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
ADHD reWired is more than just a podcast. We are a community focused on learning, growing, and connection. The website is ADHDrewired.com. You can find additional summaries and resources for each episode, learn more about the ADHD reWired coaching and accountability group, and sign up for my email newsletter to get exclusive content you won't get anywhere else. It's all at ADHDrewired.com. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Tivers. You want to see interviews with content not heard on the podcast? Subscribe to ADHD reWired on YouTube. Don't just be a passive listener, be an active member of the community. Submit your request to join our free and growing community on Facebook. Watch your message inbox. You will get a message either from myself or Nisha Subramanian. Podcasts change lives. You can make a difference in someone's life by spreading the word about this podcast. Mention it in your online communities on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, or wherever you hang out online. And be sure to share it with your friends, family, and clients. If you're a member of CHAD or any other ADHD support group, tell them about this show. You can even show them how to download it on their phone. And if you really love this particular episode, please hit share on your podcast player. I'm only one person, and I count on you to help me spread the word and get this message out there. One of the biggest things that you really can do to support this podcast and help other people discover it is to leave an honest rating and a review on iTunes or Stitcher. Looking for more ways to listen and learn? Get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial at Audible by going to audibletrial.com/ADHD reWired. Not sure where to start? You could start with Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfections or her 6-hour recorded workshop, The Power of Vulnerability. If you've already listened to those, then you might want to move on to Daring Greatly or her most recent book, Rising Strong. This is Eric Tivers, and I want to leave you with a question. Do you stay up late to finish work so you only sleep for 5 hours, and then the next day you have trouble focusing so you stay up late to finish work? If so, you might be in the ADHD productivity sleep cycle. Try this instead. Go to sleep, get an accountability partner to check in with about your sleep time. Get more sleep, get more done. Thanks for listening. Until next time.